we're just looking at a totally different club to where we were a decade ago, and it's so good for the city.
It's strange for us. We're not used to this. Exactly. It feels like a proper football club, and it feels like it's been ran like a football club. For the last 10 years, we've been competing with Premiership football down the road at Stoke. They haven't got that anymore. That club seems to be on a downward spiral at the moment, as we're on an upward spiral.
So if Vale are safe and we need a couple of points to achieve our target, I'm sure we can come to some sort of gentleman's agreement. Regarding I'm not going to make any rash predictions, Gab.
Joe, you're an absolute cop-out.
I know, Gab, you tipped Tranmere up at the beginning of the season, and it was starting
title winners for me before the season.
I was going to say it was starting to look like a bit of a good prediction a few weeks ago, but it has all clicked.
It's getting back.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. If the confidence returns and we can go on a bit of a run, then top 7 is probably still doable. You can always judge Walsall on what they do in January. And with our new owners, we'll have to see what happens.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to the 1-2 show. And I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Bell, who's a Plymouth Argyle fan. Welcome to the show, Joe. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers, Gab. Thanks for inviting me again.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. And we're also joined by Port Vale fan Danny Beza, or Danny Beresford. We'll call him Danny Beza. Good to have you on too, mate.
Yeah, and you. Cheers for having us on, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. So we've got to start with Argyle. They're the league leaders, Joe. We've had a bit of a challenge of trying to count Argyle's form off air, and we've arrived at, rather than saying 5 wins on the bounce in the league, we've gone 28 points from the last 30 available. Either way, it looks absolutely amazing for the Green Army. You must be a proud Argyle fan right now.
I am, because when you think about what we went through on the last day of last season, the 5-0 defeat to MK Dons and losing out on the final day, you know, everyone sort of left the ground that day stunned really at what had gone on. We'd been so good throughout the part of the season, and for everyone to unravel in 90 odd minutes that day was pretty tough. But in the back of your mind, that evening, you sort of sat there thinking, well, hang on a minute. We're not going to lose anyone this summer. If people want our players, they're going to have to pay good money for them. They're all under contract. So we had the foundations there for this year. And you know, with the way the football club have gone over the last 18 months, through data analytics and using data more, they were always going to recruit shrewdly. And to bring in the signings that we have that have just improved what was already there, it just seems to have taken us to a different level. And Schumacher's tweaked the system, and right now, when you look, even if you look at the teams we've played so far this year, it's pretty daunting. We've played 7 of the top 10, and we're one of the other couple out of that top 10. So we've played everyone around us, and only Portsmouth have taken 2 points off us out of that little group. It's pretty amazing form to be on at the moment, and long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Bringing in Dan on this, what do you make of Argyle's form from an outside perspective?
Looking at the outside, they look formidable at the moment. Obviously, we haven't played them yet. We've got the privilege of travelling all the way down there on a Friday night. Of course, the World Cup's on, and England might play on the Saturday, so we've got the privilege on a Friday. But yeah, not looking forward to going there. I've got bad memories of Plymouth away, to be fair. We never seem to do well, and in the nicest possible way, Joe, it's always been a bit of a hostile reception for away fans whenever I've been. I don't know what it's like now. I'm going back 10 years or so, but yeah, Plymouth seem formidable, and they seem like at the moment they're the side to catch, aren't they? And as you say, the results you've had against the big sides, the one against Sheff Wednesday stood out for me, and you've beat them all. But, you know, we'll see what we can do against you come 5th of December, but I won't be holding my breath. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, you say the hostile reception, Joe. I imagine you're the ones throwing the flame cones at the away fans, aren't you?
Absolutely not. But it's funny Danny mentions that, because I mean, this year already, I think the average is well up over 14,000 at home. I'm struggling to think off the top of my head a game where they haven't been telling us there's less than 200 tickets available on the morning of a game. It's pretty incredible. I mean, we're going to Bristol Rovers on Saturday. I know it's only a short trip up the road, relatively speaking. It's 2 and a bit hours, but the game was sold out in less than a minute and a half.
Right.
Like, the tickets were just gone like that. It's pretty incredible where we are at the moment. And soon somebody's going to have to go to Simon Hallett and say, can you put another tier on the stadium so we can get some more seats in? But that's a little bit way off, and we'd have to be at a higher level for that. But
yeah, but I mean, I imagine there have been some pretty big improvements to Home Park under Simon Howlett's regime, and I imagine that's another thing that you probably look at and think we're really growing as a club, not just on the field with work Stephen Schumacher's doing, but also off it as well.
2010 was when we announced the administration, and I think if you told me 12 years ago, when I was a 14-year-old boy making my GCSE choices, that we'd be where we are now, you wouldn't believe it.
I thought you were 34 in 2010, Joe.
I feel it, but like where the football club was to where it is now, and it's, you know, Simon Howlett has put a brilliant team in place to run the club for him. You know, he's quite open. He's an absent chairman, if you like to use a phrase, because he's based in America and he's got other interests. But the team he's put in place are running the club fantastically well. And every club has its problems. You know, there was a bit of backlash over the ticket system last week with the Rovers game, but we're just looking at a totally different club to where we were a decade ago. And it's so good for the city.
It's so interesting hearing you say that, Joe, because it feels like it's a very similar story at Port Vale, Danny, because going back to sort of, would it be about 8-9 years ago, just after the promotion under Mickey Adams, there were quite a myriad of financial problems at Port Vale, especially under Norman Smurthwaite's reign. Over the last 3 years, I think it is, we've seen some fantastic improvements under Carol and Kevin Shanahan. So just talk to us about what those changes have looked like for Vale fans.
The club's unrecognisable from when Carol and Kevin come in now. I mean, Norman, there was never money trouble in the fact that he got the money and he kept the club going. However, he was very much an asset stripper, and he was coming in and he was clawing back as much money as he could from the club. Some of the stuff I've heard that was going on at the time, I won't say on here because, you know, you never know how true they are until you get the full evidence. But let's say there was a lot going on behind the scenes when Norman was there and the money wasn't staying within the club. Since Carol and Kevin have come in, they've put money in the club, but they're growing the club, they're growing the fan base, they're reaching out in the community. I mean, everybody's heard now, you know, the Football League delivered 1.2 million meals during COVID. Vale alone were responsible for 400,000 of that.
Wow.
As one club. So, you know, we won Community Club of the Year, and we really are reaching out to community. Similar to what Joe's saying, our average attendance this year now is the highest it's been for 24 years. So we really are bringing back them fans that used to come, and the new fans. We've actually got young kids coming through the gates again now, whereas for the last 10 years, we've been competing with Premiership football down the road at Stoke. They haven't got that anymore. That club seems to be on a downward spiral at the moment as we're on an upward spiral. So we are capturing more young fans that are coming in the club. But it's the structure they've put in place. We've got a proper football structure at the club now. Dave Flitcroft's in as the director of football, and he runs everything football side. You know, divides opinions, but he's got the job done. He's taken us from League 2 to League 1 his first year. And the job this year, it's our first year in League 1, is just stabilise ourselves. And touch wood, we're looking more than capable of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well on course for stabilisation, Danny. I'm curious though, because I think you look at it, previous Vale eras, they've not had the right ownership structure and they've probably not had the best managers at times. This time there's a brilliant ownership structure, a really good manager, and the work that Flitcroft's doing as director of football. So Clark got Bristol Rovers to 9th in League One in the 16-17 season. What do you think is the ceiling for Port Vale, and how far are you? How many years do you think you are off maybe challenging to try and get into the Championship?
I think for me, we're 2-3 years off looking at challenging in the Championship. Yeah, we've got stabilised this year. We've still got a lot of the squad that come up with us, and they're doing a great job for us. But for us to take the next step, you're looking for the next calibre of players like Plymouth. You've been in the league quite a while and you've built a good squad. Danny Mayer, you added them sort of players. We've got to look at building them players now. I mean, Alice Addison's come in, who obviously was with Daryl Clark at Bristol Rovers when he did that, and what a find he's been. I mean, he's on 7 goals already this season, and if you take his goals out of his game, you'd still want him in the side because his work rate, he wins everything in the air. the fans love him already. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to look for that calibre of player to step up. And I think this year it is a case of we've got the League Two players that come up with us. Some of them are good enough for League One. Some of us are good enough for stabilisers in League One. And then we'll build again next season and probably the season after. But similar to Plymouth again, we've now got a structure in place for recruitment. Before, it's been very much we've worked with one agent who's brought his kids in. Now we've got a proper recruitment set up. They look at the stats of the players. They're constantly looking at 2, 3, 4 windows down the line and what players we're going to be targeting going forward. And it's strange for us. We're not used to this. It feels like a proper football club, and it feels like it's being ran like a football club.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, are you impressed with the progress Port Vale have made under Darrell Clarke and the current ownership regime?
I am, because I remember I follow a couple of Vale fans on Twitter, and I remember with the whole Smurthwaite debacle, it was all a bit, it seemed like the club became disconnected with the fans. And since the new regime have come in, they've worked really hard to get everyone back together, all working in, they're swimming not against the tide now, they're swimming with the tide. They're making that step forward. Darrell Clarke has his critics, but, you can't knock the job he did at Bristol Rovers. He's done a very good job at Vale getting them into the division. You just look at their last 3 results. I know Saturday they had to battle with Forest Green to get the point, but the 2 games before that, they beat Derby away from home, and it's taken a fluke of a goal against Sheffield Wednesday to beat them. And if you read into that game, the game was set for 0-0, and everyone was going to praise Port Vale for how they defended in the game. So they've made the step up. I think it's similar to us when we first came back into the division. If you remember, we got lucky under Lowe. Really, we had that good start to the year, and we were going okay by Christmas, and then we sort of fell away. We had a lot of young players. We kept the core of the squad from League Two, and you sort of need that year to gauge yourself against the division, work out what you need to take you forward. And, I'm sure in the summer and maybe even in January, Vale will start to put those building blocks to make them a solid League One side.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, you mentioned Ellis Harrison there, and he's someone who actually helped Clarke win back-to-back promotions and finish 9th in League One with the Gas. Do you think that Clarke is one of those managers who, it's like he wants players who he feels like he can trust, but when he's got that, there's a sort of a connection that means he can get something out of players that other managers might not necessarily do? Because I don't think Ellis Harrison would produce the kind of with all respect to him, I don't think he'd produce the kind of form he has at Port Vale under any other manager in League One. I think it's the connection with Darrell Clarke that really makes it.
Yeah, if you listen to the interviews and reading between the lines, Darrell Clarke's an excellent man manager. He talks to the players. He tells them exactly where they stand. He explains his decisions to them. And Ellis Harrison, when he signed for us, it was kind of his interviews were along the lines of, I fell out of love with football and I need to love playing football again. And I know I can love playing for Darrell Clarke. And again, when the interviews come, him and Darrell Clarke didn't get on at first at Bristol Rovers. In fact, Darrell Clarke sent him out on loan. And then he come back, proves his worth. And since then, they love each other. But Darrell Clarke he puts his arm around the players that need an arm around him. He shouts at the players that need shouting at. And he just seems to be able to read the players really well. And you listen to all the stuff going on behind the scenes. We've spent money on the training facilities at the club. We've spent money on the players at the club. And since Carroll's come in, it's fine-tuning things that we've done. Like under Norman Smurthwaite, the players were quite open and saying on a Monday, they knew that dinner was the leftover pies from the game before. Carol's in now and she's got proper chefs and giving them the right nutrition. They're eating the right things. But Carol always says we treat them as people who happen to be footballers, but the people. They're not just assets. They're not there, to use to sell on. The people, when you're at the club, you treat them as people. And if you treat them right, word spreads around the footballing world. And I think we're a much more attractive proposition for players now than we have been in the past, because we look after players, we look after the families. The families come to the games, and every home game, a different family's taken into the boardroom. They have a meal in the boardroom, and they're made to feel part of the club. And I think that's what Kevin and Carol have done. And I think Darrell Clarke fully buys into that. He's all about how do we help the local community? What can we do in the community? What can we do for fans?
Yeah.
And they're reaping the rewards from it with the attendances and the backing, I must say, because at the weekend, Forest Green were 2-0 down at the weekend, and the fans didn't turn on the players. And no disrespect to Forest Green, they weren't very good. They're probably the worst side I've seen this season. But they got 2 set pieces in the first half, scored them both. The goalie's made a couple of worldy saves, and we weren't at his best by any stretch. But we still had 67% of the ball, double the amount of shots as them. They only had 3 on target. We had, I think, 6, 7 on target, and the goalie's made 2 worldy saves. On another day, you play that game and we beat them. So I've gone completely off topic there. And I forgot
No, that's what we want. No, I think that's so important, though, in terms of having the right culture, because it's one thing being able to offer money, but actually the amount of time that players spend, they probably spend more waking hours at the training ground and at the club than they do at home. So if you can create the right working environment that people want to be in, that makes a massive difference. So I think you're spot on with that. Joe, let's come to some predictions then. Where do you think Plymouth Argyle are going to finish this? Oh, I can see you're dreading it, aren't you? Where do you think Plymouth Argyle are going to finish this season, and where do you think Port Vale are going to finish?
It's a little bit trickier for me to talk about Vale because we haven't, as I said, I touched on our fixture list earlier. We haven't really played the teams around the bottom, so it's very difficult to get a gauge of who to judge them against. I mean, the two that stand out that we have played down there, we played MK Dons at the weekend, and it was a bit of for an hour, it was roughly a training exercise for our lads, and similar to what Dan said, Forest Green didn't put up a great resistance against us early doors. From what I've seen of highlights and extended clips of Vale, I think they'll be okay. There's 3 or 4 teams down there that really do look like they're in a lot of trouble. So I think Vale will be okay. Regarding I'm not going to make any rash predictions, Gab.
You're an absolute cop-out.
I made stupid predictions before the MK Dons game when I was last on with you. I'm not going to do it again. Look, the aim coming into the season was to continue the work last year and break through that ceiling into the playoffs. I've not counted how many points we are above 7th place at the moment, but we're in a favourable position to do that. Right now, if we can sustain this form through November and into Christmas, then who knows? The ambitions might change and January might be focused, right, can we get 1 or 2 that will now take us to the championship this year? The club were very clear that they're on a 5-year plan to get to the championship. I think we're into the 3rd, maybe even the 4th year of that. So we're not far off being on track for it. And if it happens, I will be the first one out on the streets for the bus parade, celebrating it in the Civic Centre.
I hope you're not. I hope you wouldn't be driving the bus, Joe.
No.
You'd have had one or two.
No one would want that. Trust me.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that one comes true for you this year or next. Dan, same question to you, really. Where Argyle finishing and where will Port Vale finish?
I'll start with Argyle again. We haven't played him yet, but we have played a lot of the teams up and around there. We've played Sheff Wednesday and more than Alderzone. And as you say, it took a wonder strike to beat us. We've played Derby at Derby, and being totally honest with you, from a Vale perspective, we played them off the park. They counter-attacked us, and that was the only thing they could because they were camped back. We've played Bolton at home, got a draw against them, and they weren't. The only team that really impressed us so far, Peterborough, and they don't seem to be doing that well bar against us. You know, they're mid-table. So from what I've seen so far, I think Plymouth will minimum make the playoffs, absolute minimum. And then it's up to Plymouth in January. Can you strengthen, add 1 or 2 players to just keep you there and push on to the next level? But from what I've seen on the highlights, Plymouth look a shoo-in for at least playoffs. For us, I think we look a comfortable bottom half mid-table side. I can't see us being in and around the relegation zone come the end of the season.
I'd agree.
I think we should be safe by April. And for us, if we finish 16th or above, I think first season in the league, that's a really good season for us. And I've been more than happy with that. And similar to what you said about Plymouth, we've played a lot of the sides up the top now. We've now got games against teams down in and around us generally. And they're the games where we now need to start picking up the points. You just give us that gap to the relegation zone. And the equaliser late on at the weekend leaves us a 4-point gap to the relegation zone at the moment. Had we lost that because Forest Green are the team in there, it had gone to 1. So it was a vital late goal for us. But I can see us finishing a good 10 points or so above the drop come the end of the season.
Well,
very quickly, Gab. Very quickly, if I can just jump in, our last game, or certainly our last away game this year, is at Vale. So if Vale are safe and we need a couple of points to achieve our target, I'm sure we can come to some sort of gentleman's agreement.
Joe, I've got bad memories of playing Plymouth on the last game of the season where I think you went up and you come our place and put 5 past us on the last game of the season. You got lad in midfield with long hair and he scored hat-trick of worldies. And
Right, okay.
I'm probably going back 10 years or so, but I can't remember his name. You've got a lad in midfield with long hair, really good player for you, and you battered us. So, yeah, I've got bad memories of playing Plymouth last home game.
Well, hopefully something. Hopefully, Vale are safe and Argyle are already promoted, so it can be a bit of a party for both teams. Listen, gents, such a pleasure to chat to you both on the 1-2 show. Everyone who's watching, join us back in a moment for League Two. Welcome back to the 1-2 show, and we're here to chat about League Two, and who better to join us than Simon from Walsall Fan TV. Thanks for coming on, Simon.
Hi, mate. You okay?
Yeah, very well, thanks. And also Matthew Glazer, who's a Tranmere Rovers supporter, very happy one at the moment at that as well. Great to see you as well, Matthew.
Hi, Gab. Yeah, lovely to join you as always. You're doing some great work on here.
Ah, cheers, pal. Yeah, let's start with Rovers actually, Matthew, because you're on an incredible winning run after that 3-0 victory over Crewe Alexandra on Friday. You must feel like Mickey Mellon's men are marching into promotion contention.
Yeah, it's been a strange few weeks, hasn't it? Really, I was at Walsall a few weeks ago, really, and it was looking like it was going to peter out for a goalless draw until we scored in stoppage time. And after winning at Salford previously, it's just been this succession of 1-0 and then 2-0 and now a 3-0 win. We're getting giddy with all these goals that are going in. So, yeah. It's built on a bit of an accident, really, I think, that Mickey Mellon's just sort of fallen upon. We started off with 3 centre-halves and now we're playing a 4-4-2. It's working very well. Kieron Morris has come back into the fold. And everything's just clicked, really. Yeah, it's sometimes football's funny, isn't it? You need a bit of fortune, rub of the green along the way. But we just don't look like we're going to concede. I was at Prenton Park on Friday against Crewe. Very solid. It didn't really give them a sniff. And it was a very organised and comfortable victory, which you're not used to saying comfortable victory, are you, when you support your own team?
Yeah, of course. We're going to bring Simon in because being a Walsall fan, he saw a fair bit of Kieron Morris, who's made such an impact since, as Matthew mentioned, coming back into the Rovers side. I think there's a feeling in the Saddlers camp, Simon, that Kieron Morris did very well during his time there, and he seems to be quite well remembered by a lot of Saddlers supporters.
My memories of Kieron Morris, he was an excellent player. Always willing to shoot, but could never find the target. And it was one of those, if he can start finding the target, because he's obviously got great ability, but he couldn't hit a barn door, really. But obviously he's sort of getting that together now as he's maturing over the years. He's sort of settling down and being calm. One thing we've talked about a lot, and I think we'll all appreciate the same, it's that coolness at that moment that you're striking the ball to shoot that makes all the difference. And perhaps that's what he didn't have, and now he has got that, and he's starting to find the target. And of course, it was his shot that led to the Tranmere goal, wasn't it? Of course.
Yeah, it was. And I must say that on the subject of Walsall, that as much as Peter Clark, it was nice to see the old boy back and playing, even if it was against us. I thought the lad alongside us, who I think was briefly at Tranmere, Donovan Daniels, was probably the most outstanding defender on the pitch. Never mind Dinel Sinew and Jordan Turnbull. I thought Daniels had a very impressive game and didn't deserve to be on the losing side on that particular occasion.
Yeah, I thought we were heading for 0-0, and I think we'd have been reasonably happy with that. Of course, Jacob Maddox had that chance in injury time just before Tranmere scored the winner. But again, it was one of those moments. It's that coolness and that calm persona. You watch them in the Premier League and they just pass the ball into the net as if they're just in training and just messing around. And in League Two, quite often, sort of rush of blood to the head and great opportunities go flying wide and stuff. So it's frustrating. I thought Tranmere were very good against us, to be honest. As you say, very solid at the back.
Yeah,
and it was two sides that were sort of defences were on top throughout, weren't they?
Yeah, they're both well organised, cancelled each other out for the most part. But Harrogate beckons for us on Saturday, really, and I think there'll be, much as Harrogate beat Hartlepool last weekend, the general feeling is that we'll go there as favourites now, which you wouldn't have said a few weeks ago. And there's just this real strong feeling that we're starting to build something with the average age. And I know, Gab, you tipped Tranmere up at the beginning of the season, and it was starting
title winners for me before the season.
I was going to say it was starting to look like a bit of a dud prediction a few weeks ago, but it has all clicked.
Getting back.
And the group are growing together, but much as Simi is getting a lot of attention as the loan signing, it's the wing backs really. They're Josh Dacres-Cogley and Ethan Bristow. They're so athletic and they're so strong and fast that if you beat them once, you have to beat them again because they get back and recover as well. So yeah, it's amazing what can be achieved built on the foundations of a good back four, back five in the case of Ross doing.
How does Michael Flynn build a Walsall side, do you think, Simon, that can challenge for the playoffs this season? And do you think that's still a realistic ambition despite what was a pretty long winless run?
I thought he was setting things up 3-5-2 to play out from the back, but he seems to have scrapped that for the time being because we were sort of conceding possession sort of on the turn, trying to break out to defence. And they're going long more so now, which is not a particularly pleasurable type of football for me. I'd sooner see us passing the ball around. But maybe that's sort of to get the confidence back and sort of take some pressure off the defence. I don't think there's a lot wrong with the team generally. I think the players that we've got, obviously, the big injury list is a problem. And Joe Riley, he was sort of one of the marquee signings, and we're expecting him to be the midfield general. But he hasn't kicked a ball yet. And that's a big loss. He had a foot injury. I did have a chat with Joe, and they didn't know what the problem was. And we talked through several different areas and they hadn't worked out what it was, but apparently they've worked out what it is now. They haven't divulged it, but hopefully we'll be getting Joe back in the side. So I think he would make a big difference to us. Yeah. As far as sort of whether we can make a promotion push or not, I think every team we play seem to be under the impression that sort of they've done really well to get points off us and they're sort of rating us very highly. So maybe it's one of those things, if the confidence returns and we can go on a bit of a run, then top 7 is probably still doable. But there's several areas that remain a concern. Danny Johnson has been excellent for us. But of course, he could very well be disappearing in January, which with Connor Wilkinson becoming fit, ideally, you'd want both of those. But if DJ was to go and we got Connor Wilkinson, then I don't think that's going to create as many goals as DJ has been doing. So that's not perhaps a strength, particularly for Connor Wilkinson coming back from a cruciate knee ligament injury. And then we've got Liam Bennett. He's on loan from Cambridge, and he's been very good, to be honest. And I know Cambridge is struggling at the moment, and some of their fan base are calling for why haven't we got Liam Bennett here? So potentially, if he went back and DJ was taken off somewhere, which is possible. I know he fell out with Nigel Clough, so Nigel Clough isn't going to be wanting him back. But their chairman, given the goals he's scored so far this season, there's other people going to be coming for him.
That certainly makes sense. So just on that point about relying on one goal scorer, obviously you'll be hoping Danny Johnson does stay for the remainder of the season, but Tranmere have shown previously that you can succeed at this level, relying quite heavily on a sole source of goals with James Norwood in the 18-19 campaign. Matthew, do you think that that's a template if you've got the right organisational and you can get the ball into that centre forward in good areas, that you can have a blueprint for promotion relying quite heavily on one centre forward?
Yeah, or in the case of Forest Green last season, there were two, weren't there, that were scoring 20 plus goal ratio tallies. It helps immensely to have somebody who's a prolific scorer, and I'm pretty sure that that's backed up by some names that are playing at much higher levels, really, for your Exeter Cities and what have you, that have done well in the division. And the goals have been spread around quite a lot with Tranmere so far. I know we're been scoring in ones and twos, really, but funnily enough, Kane Hemmings, who we signed from Burton, who was regarded as probably almost one of the better strikers in League Two at the moment, is almost playing as a bit of a foil for the others to run on, whether it's the injured Paul Lewis, Elliot Nevitt, Kieron Morris, or I think goals is a slight sort of concern for Tranmere insofar as that Hemmings is coming deep, and we don't have a huge sort of plethora of attacking options. But
you want Hemmings to be stretching the line as well, don't you, Matthew? He's that sort of player. You want him getting beyond. You don't want him to be receiving the ball with his back to goal, because I can't imagine that being where he's at his best.
No, potentially not, Gab. And I associated him with getting sort of being a 1 in 2, 1 in 3 sort of goal a game sort of player, but it's not really worked out that way so far this season. He scored a penalty at Sutton, but he's been pretty low on the ground, and he's been more of a link-up player as well. And Mickey Mellon's fully aware of the need for more firepower. We just seem to have, as I say, Lewis's sideline with a hamstring, and Bongo's not played at all for us. And Glatzel's got injured from his loan spell at Liverpool. So we are low on the ground, and we can't keep keeping clean sheets and hope to edge out teams, because we will start conceding goals no matter how good the defence is. But it goes without saying, doesn't it? I think really that, the way that Norwood, I think we started to build it, as you well know, Gab, we started to build a style of play around James Norwood and taking advantage of his pace and almost playing counter-punch football as well. And it worked well. And you take advantage of that when you have a striker who has that ability to score that type of goal, really. But as I say, the way that Forest Green went up with those two strikers last year wasn't a coincidence, was it?
No, of course not. Let's go on to some predictions then, starting with you, Matthew. Where do you think Tranmere Rovers are going to finish this season? I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And where do you think Walsall will finish?
Well, I think that Walsall were very organised, and I'm quite a big fan of Flynn, and I know that they've had a bit of a wobbly start as well. I would imagine Walsall will be a top half team, but potentially miss out on the playoffs. But I do think that they've got a good structure there as well. And if they kept hold of Johnson, certainly. I think Tranmere will probably finish in the playoff positions. I'm not going to tempt fate by predicting automatic. And as I say, I'm not sure that this run of wins and clean sheets is it's not sustainable. Let's face it, it just isn't, is it? Wins and clean sheets are not. So therefore, I'll say we'll finish 5th, and I'll give Walsall a polite 9th place, if that's all right.
What do you think, Simon?
I think Matthew, you're probably about spot on there. I think Tranmere should make top 7. And Walsall, if we're in the top half, I think we'll have had a reasonable season. I really want us back in League One, and I'm sure you feel exactly the same. It's going to be a tough ask, I think. It depends what happens in January, obviously. It's sort of a popular comment from a friend of mine that I see at the game. And he said, you can always judge Walsall on what they do in January. And with our new owners, we'll have to see what happens. But if we were in the lower half of the table at the end of the season, that would not look well for Mike Flynn. We know a lot of managers have sort of had the boot already. It's like crazy time. We had a chat recently online discussing Mike Flynn during our winless run. And the popular voice was stick with him, but a lot don't. But as you say, in answer to your question, I think Walsall, 9th. I'd be quite happy with 9th right now. But secretly, I'd like us to be top 7, and sort of have the excitement of the playoffs. But perhaps whether we'd get through that is another thing altogether, isn't it?
It's having the patience, isn't it, from the owners to have a bit of, Flynn came in and did a good job initially last year after Taylor. So it's the same thing's happened with Mellon now, where some of the fans were calling for his head a few games ago, and now patience is starting to seemingly pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going Tranmere top 3. It's Mickey Mellon's no hour. I think that's going to make the difference. Pressing Tranmere side, solidity. I'm going to go with it. We'll have to wait and see. Listen, gents, it's been such a pleasure to chat about Walsall and Tranmere with you on the 1-2 show. Go follow FansBets on their YouTube channel and on Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. This has been the 1-2 show. I'll see you again very soon.